The gleaming spires of Earth's first interspecies medical academy rose against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, its crystalline architecture a blend of human ingenuity and alien precision. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, watching as the latest batch of alien medical students emerged from their atmospheric adjustment chambers. Their varied anatomies, from the crystalline archeans to the gaseous nebulons contained in their environment suits, reflected the diversity of the galaxy's medical traditions. "Welcome to Earth," she announced, her universal translator converting her words into 15 different languages simultaneously. "You are about to begin the most challenging medical training program in the known galaxy." The alien students shifted uncomfortably. They had all read the briefings about Earth's classification as a death world, but being here was different. The gravity pulled at their bodies, the atmospheric pressure squeezed their forms, and the very air buzzed with the planet's relentless energy. Zix 427, a crystalline archean whose faceted body refracted sunlight into rainbow patterns, raised an appendage. "Professor, we've reviewed Earth's medical protocols. They seem unnecessarily aggressive. Surely there are more elegant solutions than your emergency trauma response procedures." Sarah smiled, remembering her own prejudices before she began working with alien species. "Your species evolved on worlds where sudden trauma is rare. A cut might take days to become life-threatening. Here on Earth, we developed medical techniques that match our environment's challenges." As if to emphasize her point, a screech of tires echoed from the street below. A hover ambulance materialized through the morning fog, its emergency fields dispersing the mist. Through the academy's transparent walls, the alien students watched in horror as human paramedics rushed a patient through the emergency bay doors. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible concussion. One paramedic shouted, their movements swift and precise. The patient, a mountain climber who had taken a bad fall, was surrounded by a flurry of activity that to the alien students looked like barely controlled chaos. "That will be your first observation assignment," Sarah announced, noting how several of her alien students had shifted into their species' equivalent of pale shock. "Human emergency medicine in action. Follow me." The next few hours were a crash course in human medical reality. The alien students watched as human doctors set bones, sealed wounds, and stabilized vital signs with what seemed to them like brutal efficiency. Every action was a revelation, and a challenge to their preconceptions. But the tissue damage from such rapid healing, protested Neb-12, a nebulon whose gaseous form swirled agitatedly in their containment suit, "is preferable to death," Sarah completed the thought. "On Earth, we learned early that sometimes you have to break something a little more to heal it properly. Our bodies evolved to handle it." As the day progressed, Sarah led them through the Academy's various departments. In each one, the alien students encountered examples of what they considered barbaric medical practices: the setting of bones, the suturing of wounds, the use of synthetic materials to replace damaged tissue. "Tomorrow," Sarah announced as the tour concluded, "we begin practical training. You'll learn why humans developed these techniques, and more importantly, how to adapt them to your own species' medical traditions." The alien students exchanged glances, their various sensory organs conveying a mixture of anxiety and fascination. They had come to Earth expecting to study primitive medicine. Instead, they were beginning to realize they might be the primitive ones when it came to handling trauma and emergency care. As they filed out of the main lecture hall, Zix 427 lingered behind. "Professor," the archean's crystalline form hummed with curiosity, "how did humans develop such effective methods without access to cellular reconstruction matrices or quantum healing fields?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Necessity, Zix. On Earth, waiting for perfect healing conditions means death. We learned to work with what we had, to be aggressive when needed, and to understand that sometimes the fastest solution, while messy, is the best one." The archean's crystal facets shifted, and what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a thoughtful frown. Perhaps we have much to learn from Earth's primitive medicine after all." That's why you're here, Sarah replied, watching as the last rays of sunset painted the Academy's crystalline towers in shades of gold and crimson. To learn that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the most elegant one. It's the one that keeps your patient alive. The incident in Lab 7. 3 weeks into the semester, Lab 7 hummed with activity. The Medical Academy's most advanced training facility was designed to simulate real-world emergencies across multiple planetary environments. Today's lesson focused on rapid response protocols, with mixed teams of human and alien students practicing basic emergency procedures. Dr. Chen watched as ZX-427 delicately attempted to apply a pressure bandage to a simulated wound on a human analog dummy. The Archean's crystalline appendages moved with precise, almost mathematical grace, and far too slowly. "Dead patient, Zix," Sarah called out. "In the time you spent calculating the optimal bandage tension, your human patient lost 2 liters of blood." "But Professor," Zix's crystal lattice flickered with frustration. "The pressure must be exactly." The classroom's emergency alarm cut through their conversation. Red lights pulsed as the Academy's eye announced, "Chemical containment breach in xenobiology sections, the corrosive agent release, multiple casualties reported." Sarah's training kicked in instantly. This is not a drill. All students, emergency protocols are now in effect. She turned to activate the classroom's emergency shields, but before she could reach the controls, a thunderous crash shook the building. Through the transparent walls, they watched in horror as caustic green vapor billowed through the corridor. 2 research assistants, 1 human and 1 Meridian, stumbled out of the cloud. The human's protective suit was smoking, dissolving under the chemical assault. The Meridian's environmental field flickered and failed. "Stay back," Sarah commanded as several students moved to help. "That's cerulean acid, level 4 corrosive." She grabbed the emergency response kit, but ZX-427 blocked her path. "Professor, the chemical composition will destroy organic matter in seconds. We must wait for proper containment." Sarah pushed past the crystalline student. "We don't have time for proper containment." She sealed her emergency suit and charged into the corridor. The alien students watched in fascinated horror as Sarah worked. Her movements were quick, almost brutal by their standards. She dragged both victims into the classroom's decontamination field, stripped off the human's dissolving protective gear with decisive tears, and began emergency neutralization procedures. "Ned 12, I need your atmospheric manipulation. Filter these fumes. Zix, your crystalline structure is acid-resistant. Help me with containment. Everyone else, prepare emergency medical support." The next few minutes were chaos by alien standards, perfection by human ones. Ned 12's gaseous form expanded, creating a living filter that scrubbed the toxic fumes. ZX-427, moving faster than they ever had in their crystalline life, helped Sarah seal the breach. When it was over, both victims were stabilized. The human research assistant, despite severe chemical burns, was already making jokes about needing a vacation. The Meridian, their environmental field restored, pulsed with the colors of relief and gratitude. "That," Sarah announced to her stunned class, "is why we practice emergency response. Reality doesn't wait for perfect conditions or optimal solutions." Later, as the emergency response teams finished their work, ZX-427 approached Sarah. The Archean's usually perfect crystalline form showed slight stress fractures from their rapid movement during the crisis. "Professor," Zix's voice resonated with new understanding. "I believe I owe you an apology. When you said human medical techniques were developed out of necessity, I didn't truly comprehend. Today, I saw how seconds can mean the difference between life and death." Sarah nodded, checking the bandage on her own arm where some of the acid had splashed. Every human medical student learns this lesson eventually. Sometimes the messy solution is the only solution that works. "But the risks you took," Zix's crystal structure rippled with concern, "are part of the job," Sarah finished. On Earth, we learned early that sometimes you have to risk your own safety to save others. It's not just medicine, it's who we are. The incident in Lab 7 marked a turning point. The alien students began to see human medical techniques not as primitive or brutal, but as ingeniously adapted to a world where waiting for perfect conditions meant losing lives. They started to understand that what looked like chaos to them was actually a highly evolved response to an environment that never gave humans the luxury of time. As Sarah reviewed the day's incident reports, she smiled at a note from the Academy's administration. Requests for transfer to the Earth medical program had doubled overnight. Sometimes, she reflected, the best teaching moments were the ones you never planned for. Learning the hard way. 2 months into the semester, the atmosphere at the Interspecies Medical Academy had changed dramatically. The alien students who once recoiled at human medical procedures now attacked their studies with newfound determination. Even the most hesitant among them had begun to understand that Earth's primitive methods held secrets their advanced civilizations had never considered. The Academy's simulation chamber hummed to life, projecting a perfect replica of a mining accident on Mars. Zix 427's crystalline form glittered under the emergency lights as they led their response team, a mix of human and alien medical students, into the scenario. Multiple trauma victims, Zix announced, their voice steady. Ned 12, assess atmospheric conditions. T. Lara, begin triage. Remember human protocols, fastest intervention first, perfection later. Sarah watched from the observation deck, pride warming her chest. 2 months ago, Zix would have spent precious minutes calculating the perfect approach. Now, the Archean moved with decisive efficiency, their crystalline appendages applying emergency medical techniques with swift precision. The simulation threw challenge after challenge at the team. Depressurization threats, toxic gas leaks, crushing injuries. Each crisis demanded immediate action, forcing the alien students to abandon their ingrained preference for methodical, perfect solutions in favor of rapid, effective intervention. Cardiac arrest. To Lara, a meridian healer whose bioluminescent form pulsed with urgency, called out. Without hesitation, they began chest compressions on the human victim, something that would have been unthinkable weeks ago, when the very idea of deliberately applying such force to a patient seemed barbaric. Clear. Neb 12's gaseous form contracted and expanded, delivering a carefully modulated electrical charge through their containment suit's medical interfaces. The simulation dummy's heart resumed its rhythm. As the scenario concluded, Sarah entered the chamber. Impressive work, everyone. Especially you, Zix. Your response time has improved by 300%. The Archean's crystalline surface showed traces of stress fractures, badges of honor from their swift movements. I've been studying human emergency medicine archives. The historical development of your techniques is fascinating. You achieved so much with so little. That's exactly what makes human medicine unique. A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. James Chen, Sarah's husband and the Academy's xenobiology expert, entered the simulation chamber. Most species developed medical technology to prevent emergencies. Humans developed techniques to survive them. Which is why, Sarah added, we're now seeing unprecedented survival rates across the galaxy when our methods are combined. The Centaurian mining accident last week. The human-trained medical team saved 43 lives using techniques that would have been considered primitive 6 months ago. The discussion was interrupted by a priority alert from the Academy's administrative AI. Incoming emergency transmission from Outpost Gamma 7. Multiple casualties. Xenobiological contamination. Medical response team requested. Sarah's expression turned serious. This isn't a simulation. Gamma 7 is a real research station, and they need help. Who's ready for some field experience? The alien students exchanged glances. 2 months ago, they would have hesitated, insisting on perfect preparation and optimal conditions. Now, led by Zix 427, they moved as one toward the emergency transport bay. Professor, Zix called back, their crystalline form already configuring for emergency deployment. I've been meaning to ask, why did humans develop such effective emergency medicine instead of focusing on prevention like other species? Sarah checked her medical kit as they hurried toward the transport. Because on Earth, we learned early that you can't prevent every disaster. What matters is how you respond when prevention fails. The galaxy focused on making their worlds safer. We focused on surviving them when they weren't. The emergency transport hummed to life, its quantum engines preparing for near-light speed travel. As they prepared for departure, Sarah watched her students, human and alien alike, moving through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. They had come seeking to learn about primitive medicine. Instead, they were discovering that sometimes the most advanced medical knowledge in the galaxy was learning how to save lives with nothing but your hands and your wits. What awaited them at Outpost Gamma 7 would put everything they'd learned to the test, but Sarah had no doubt they were ready. After all, they had learned the hardest lesson of human medicine. In an emergency, perfect is the enemy of good enough to keep someone alive. Crisis in the ER. Outpost Gamma 7 loomed before them, a massive research station suspended in the void between stars. Emergency lights pulsed through its viewport windows, casting an ominous red glow across its hexagonal structure. As their transport approached, even the most seasoned members of the team fell silent at the sight. Life support compromised in sectors 3 through 7. The station's AI reported multiple casualties, unknown biological contamination spreading through ventilation systems. Sarah took command. Zix, your crystalline structure is resistant to most biological agents. You're on point. Neb 12, use your atmospheric manipulation to create safe corridors. Everyone else, full containment protocols. They entered through the emergency airlock, immediately confronted by scenes that would test everything they'd learned. Station personnel lay scattered through the corridors, some unconscious, others writhing in pain. Strange, bioluminescent spores drifted through the air like malevolent fireflies. Professor, Talera's bioluminescent form flickered with recognition. These spores, they're similar to meridian neural parasites, but different, more aggressive. Hybridized, a weak voice called out. A human scientist propped against the wall struggled to speak through blood-flecked lips. We were studying adaptation rates, lost containment. Zix moved with decisive speed, their crystalline form already configured for emergency triage. Multiple infections, Professor. The spores are attempting neural invasion across all species present. Sarah's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of scenario that demonstrated why human medical approaches had evolved as they had. They didn't have time for perfect solutions or careful study. People were dying now. Listen up, she commanded. We're combining approaches. Lara, use your bioluminescent resonance to disrupt the spore's neural invasion patterns. Neb 12, your atmospheric manipulation can help contain and filter them. Zix, your crystalline matrices can temporarily house endangered neural patterns. Human team members, we're going old school. Physical trauma support and emergency stabilization. What followed was a symphony of medical techniques that would have been impossible just months ago. Lara pulsed with carefully modulated frequencies that sent the spores into dormancy. Neb 12's gaseous form expanded through the station's ventilation systems, creating safe zones and filtering out contaminants. Zix moved from patient to patient, their crystalline structure temporarily preserving neural patterns that would otherwise have been lost. The human medical students demonstrated why their species' primitive techniques remained relevant even in an age of advanced technology. They stabilized failing bodies, maintained vital functions, and bought precious time for their alien colleagues' more sophisticated interventions to work. We're losing Sector 5, someone shouted. The station's structure groaned as emergency bulkheads threatened to seal automatically, potentially trapping dozens of infected personnel. Not on my watch, Sarah growled. She turned to her team. This is where human medicine shines, when everything's going wrong and you have to improvise. Zix, remember Lab 7. We're doing that on a station-wide scale. Understanding flickered through Zix's crystalline form. The Archean began reconfiguring their structure, creating a massive neural buffer network. Tolera's bioluminescence synchronized with it, while Neb-12 expanded their atmospheric manipulation to unprecedented scales. Hours blurred together. The team worked without rest, combining human determination with alien capabilities in ways never before attempted. When standard techniques failed, they invented new ones on the spot. When equipment malfunctioned, they improvised replacements. Finally, the station's AI announced, biological contamination levels decreasing, life support stabilizing, emergency contained. Sarah looked around the main medical bay, now crowded with recovering patients. Every member of her team showed signs of exhaustion. Human students slumped against walls. Tolera's bioluminescence dimmed to a soft glow. Neb-12's gaseous form moving sluggishly in their containment suit, and Zix's crystalline surface marked with stress patterns from their neural preservation efforts. "I understand now," Zix said quietly, their usually musical voice rough with fatigue. "Human medicine isn't primitive at all. It's adaptable. When our advanced techniques failed, your crude methods kept people alive long enough for us to find solutions. That's what being human is about," Sarah replied, checking a bandage on her arm where a falling bulkhead had caught her. "We survive. We adapt. We keep going until we find a way. And now, thanks to all of you, we can do it better than ever." As they began treating the last of the patients, Sarah received a message from the Academy. Word of their success had already spread. The galaxy was starting to understand that human medical techniques weren't just brutal necessity. They were an essential complement to more advanced approaches. Sometimes, the old ways were exactly what you needed when the new ones failed. Graduation day. The main auditorium of Earth's Interspecies Medical Academy sparkled under the light of 3 holographic suns, a gesture of respect for the various homeworlds of its first graduating class. 6 months had passed since the Gamma 7 incident, and the galaxy's medical community would never be the same. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium, looking out over an audience that represented 20 different species. In the front row, her students sat proudly. Zix 427's crystalline form now bore permanent iridescent patterns, scars from their neural preservation efforts that they wore as badges of honor. Neb-12's gaseous form swirled with confident purpose in their newly designed medical containment suit. Tolera's bioluminescence pulsed with the steady rhythm they had perfected during countless emergency responses. When this program began, Sarah started, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. Many called it a waste of resources. Why teach primitive human medical techniques to species with far more advanced technology? Today, the results speak for themselves. Holoprojections appeared above the audience, showing statistics that had shocked the galactic medical community. Survival rates in emergency situations had increased by 300% when human techniques were combined with advanced alien medical technology. The infamous golden hour, that critical period after trauma where human emergency medicine proved most effective, had been extended to 3 hours through the application of alien preservation techniques. But the numbers tell only part of the story, Sarah continued. The real achievement is not in what we taught you, but in what you taught us. Together, we've created something entirely new, a medical philosophy that combines the best of all our approaches. The ceremony proceeded with the presentation of credentials, each graduate receiving both traditional human medical certificates and their species equivalent. But it was the unofficial symbols that meant the most. The stress patterns in Zix's crystal structure, the new harmonics in Tolera's bioluminescence, the complexity of Neb-12's atmospheric manipulations. These were the true marks of their achievement. After the ceremony, as the graduates gathered in the Academy's observation dome, Zix approached Sarah with news. "Professor, the Archean Medical Council has approved the construction of 5 emergency response centers based on human designs. They want you to oversee the training programs." The Meridian Healing Collective has made a similar request. Lara added, their lights pulsing with excitement. They're integrating human rapid response protocols into our traditional healing practices. Ned 12 swirled in their containment suit, and the Nebulon consciousness has approved the development of new emergency medical interfaces based on human triage systems. They're calling it a revolution in gaseous medicine. Sarah smiled, remembering the skepticism these same students had shown just months ago. And what about you? What will you do with your training? Zix's crystal structure resonated with purpose. I'm establishing an emergency response unit on Arxia Prime. Our world has always focused on prevention, but now we understand the value of being prepared when prevention fails. I'll be adapting human battlefield medicine techniques for use in Meridian stellar nurseries, Lara said. Those regions are too volatile for traditional healing approaches, but human methods, combined with our bioluminescent therapy. And I, Ned 12 interrupted with an atmospheric flourish, have been appointed to lead the first Nebulon Emergency Medical Response Team. We're already developing new techniques that combine our atmospheric manipulation with human-style rapid intervention. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message on the Academy's emergency channel. A colony ship had suffered a drive malfunction in the outer rim. Medical assistance was needed. Without hesitation, the graduates moved toward the emergency transport bay, their movements now a perfect blend of human urgency and alien precision. Sarah watched them go, knowing that each emergency they faced would further prove what they had learned. That the best medicine wasn't about choosing between advanced technology and primitive techniques, but about understanding when to use each and how to combine them. As the transport ship disappeared into the quantum fold, Sarah received a message from the Galactic Medical Council. Applications for the next year's program had increased tenfold. Species that had once looked down on human medicine were now eager to learn its secrets. She smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. The galaxy had expected Earth to learn from its more advanced neighbors, and it had. But in teaching others about human medicine, they had created something greater than the sum of its parts, a new way of healing that combined the best of all worlds. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not the techniques themselves, but the reminder that sometimes the oldest solutions, combined with the newest technology, created possibilities that neither could achieve alone. And somewhere out there, graduates of Earth's first interspecies medical academy were proving it, one emergency at a time.